The spaceship landed smoothly on a hidden platform, far from the eyes of Earth's population. The sleek silver craft bore the insignia of the Galactic Compliance Bureau, an organization that strictly monitored civilizations to ensure they followed the intergalactic laws. Inside, Viria, a tall alien woman with violet-hued skin and piercing silver eyes, adjusted the cuffs of her uniform. She was here on an inspection mission. Her job, to study human recreational activities and determine whether they were too dangerous for a civilized species. Her brows furrowed as she stepped outside, breathing in the strange air of Earth. Everything felt chaotic. The wind, the lights, the distant sound of human activity. She had read the reports. Humans were a strange, unpredictable species. Some called them resilient. Others called them reckless. A human stood waiting for her near the landing site. His posture was relaxed, his hands in his jacket pockets. This was her assigned guide, Daniel Carter, a cultural exchange officer who was supposed to introduce her to Earth's leisure activities. "You must be Vereda," he said with a grin. "Welcome to Earth. Ready for some fun?" Viria straightened her back. "I am here for an investigation, not fun. The Galactic Compliance Bureau has strict regulations regarding recreational activities. I will determine whether your species is engaging in illegal or hazardous behavior." Daniel chuckled. "Well, you're in for a surprise then. Humans love things that seem dangerous. But trust me, it's all in good fun." She narrowed her eyes. "We will see." The shock at the Derby. The first destination Daniel took her to is something called a demolition derby. Viria observed from a raised platform, her arms crossed. Below her, an arena filled with battered, reinforced cars revved their engines. A crowd of humans cheered wildly, some waving signs, others yelling in excitement. The engines roared, and suddenly, furash. Two cars smashed into each other with tremendous force. Metal crumpled, tires screeched, and smoke filled the air. Another car accelerated, slamming into the wreckage. Viria's eyes widened. Was this a battle? A riot? A war ritual? She grabbed Daniel's sleeve. This is illegal." Daniel laughed. "Nah, it's a sport. No one gets seriously hurt. These cars are reinforced, and the drivers wear protective gear. It's all about the thrill." Viria could barely process his words. She watched as more cars rammed into each other, the sound of metal crashing into metal filling the air. Humans around her shouted in joy, completely unbothered by the destruction. "Your species finds pleasure in destruction?" she asked, horrified. Daniel shrugged. "Well, yeah, it's exciting. There are rules to keep it safe, but part of the fun is seeing which car lasts the longest." She shook her head. In most advanced civilizations, such reckless behavior would be outlawed. He grinned. "Good thing Earth isn't like most civilizations." The madness continues. Hoping the next activity would be more reasonable, Viria followed Daniel to a skydiving center. Her relief was short-lived. She stood in stunned silence, watching as humans willingly threw themselves out of an aircraft, plummeting toward the ground with nothing but a piece of fabric attached to their backs. "No," she whispered. "This cannot be real." One of the instructors gestured toward Daniel and grinned. "Want to give it a try?" Before she could protest, Daniel was already being suited up. "Come on, Viria. You wanted to see what humans do for fun, right?" "I expected something civilized," she snapped. The instructor laughed. "This is civilized. We do this all the time." Viria's stomach twisted as she watched Daniel jump out of the plane with a carefree smile. For a few seconds, he was free falling, the wind whipping against him. Then his parachute deployed, and he floated gently toward the earth. When he landed, he had the biggest grin on his face. "That was amazing. You should try it." Viria glared at him. "Your species is insane." He smirked. "You say that now, but you haven't even seen the best parts yet." Viria exhaled, pressing her fingers to her temple. This was only the beginning. She had a sinking feeling that this mission would be far more challenging than she had expected. Viria sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Daniel's ground vehicle, still processing what she had witnessed. Her mind replayed the demolition derby and the skydiving madness. Humans enjoyed activities that seemed completely reckless, and what disturbed her the most was that they enjoyed it. She adjusted the silver cuffs of her uniform, her expression serious. So far, what I have seen is beyond illogical. Destruction, free falling, and risking one's life for amusement. These are not the actions of a rational species. Daniel grinned as he steered the vehicle. You're looking at it the wrong way. It's not about destruction. It's about pushing limits. Humans love to challenge themselves, to experience things that make their hearts race. Viria crossed her arms. A logical species would avoid unnecessary danger. He chuckled. Yeah, then let's see what you think of this next one. Viria exhaled, pressing her fingers to her temple. This was only the beginning. The vehicle stopped in front of a massive open area. Dozens of humans were gathered, cheering as a group of individuals performed incredible feats, jumping between rooftops, flipping in midair, running up walls. Viria's eyes narrowed. What are they doing? Daniel smirked. It's called parkour. Before she could respond, one of the athletes sprinted toward a wall, ran up it with unbelievable agility, flipped backward, and landed perfectly on their feet. Viria took a step back, her expression unreadable. That is not possible. Another human leaped across a wide gap between two buildings, rolling upon landing, and continuing as if defying gravity was normal. Daniel folded his arms, amused by Viria's reaction. Humans aren't built to fly, but we find ways to make it work. Viria blinked. That is illegal. Daniel laughed. It's exercise. Viria didn't understand how something so dangerous could be considered exercise. The individuals performing these feats could easily fall, break their bones, or worse. And yet, they continued, smiling, laughing, pushing themselves further. One of the parkour athletes noticed her staring and grinned. Want to try? Viria took a step back. Absolutely not. Daniel chuckled. All right, let's move on. I have something even better planned. The ultimate test. Roller coasters. Viria was certain that nothing could surprise her more than what she had already witnessed. She was wrong. The moment she stepped into the amusement park, her senses were overwhelmed. Bright lights flashed, music blared, humans laughed and screamed, moving between rides and attractions. But what caught her attention most was the towering metal structures weaving through the sky like serpents. Viria's stomach twisted as she watched a massive machine lift a group of humans into the air, only to drop them at high speed along twisting tracks. Her fingers twitched. This is not right. Daniel's grin widened. This is a roller coaster, one of the best human inventions. The feeling of weightlessness, speed, and twists. It's amazing. Viria's eyes darkened. You are all mad. Only a little, he admitted. But you have to try it. No. Yes. Absolutely not. Before she could protest further, Daniel had already pulled her toward the ride. The safety harness locked over her chest, and she found herself seated next to him, her hands gripping the metal bar tightly. The machine lurched forward, climbing higher and higher. Viria's heart pounded as the ground disappeared beneath them. This is not logical, she muttered, her fingers digging into the seat. Daniel smirked. Don't think, just feel. Then, the drop. Viria screamed as the coaster plunged, twisting at impossible angles. Her stomach flipped as the ride shot through loops, turns, and sudden falls. For a moment, she was certain she would die. But then, something unexpected happened. She laughed. The wind rushed against her face, her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt something she could not explain. When the ride came to a stop, she was breathless. Daniel nudged her. So, how was it? She hesitated. She could not admit that she had enjoyed it. It was tolerable. Daniel's smirk deepened. You screamed louder than anyone on this ride. Her face darkened. That is false information. He laughed. Welcome to the human way of fun, Varia. She exhaled. This was only her second day on Earth, and already she felt different. Maybe humans weren't just reckless. Maybe there was something more to them. Varia sat on a bench outside the amusement park, her arms crossed and her mind racing. She had barely recovered from the roller coaster incident, yet Daniel was already planning the next activity. The memory of the free fall, the speed, the twists still made her feel lightheaded. She glanced at Daniel, who was grinning like he had just uncovered the biggest secret in the galaxy. You're enjoying this too much, she said flatly. He chuckled. Come on, admit it, you had fun. She turned away. I admit nothing. Daniel smirked. Well, if you think that was intense, wait until you see what's next. Varia narrowed her eyes. I do not trust you. You shouldn't, he said, laughing. Before she could object, he led her toward another location. This time, the environment was different. A giant indoor facility with ramps, obstacles, and a large crowd gathered around a central stage. Varia looked up, confused. What is this place? Daniel's grin widened. Welcome to the extreme sports arena. Defying gravity, human style. Varia's eyes darted around the arena as she observed humans performing impossible feats. One individual raced toward a massive half-pipe, launching into the air on a wheeled board, twisting midair before landing perfectly. Another sped toward a ramp on a bicycle, flipping backward twice before touching down. Her fingers twitched. This is unnatural. Daniel laughed. This is skateboarding and BMX biking, sports that take skill, balance, and a whole lot of courage. Varia's gaze followed another human who ran toward a wall, jumped, kicked off, flipped over, and landed smoothly. She inhaled sharply. That should be illegal. Daniel smirked. You say that about everything. She shook her head, trying to understand the madness before her. The risk was undeniable. If one mistake happened, these humans would fall, crash, or even break their bones. Yet they did it with smiles on their faces. Do they not fear injury? She asked. Daniel shrugged. Of course they do. But the thrill, the challenge, it's what drives them. Humans don't just accept limits. We break them. Varia was silent, watching as one of the skateboarders fell, skidding across the floor. She expected them to cry out in pain, but instead they laughed, got up, and tried again. The resilience fascinated her. The cage of chaos, human combat for fun. Just when she thought she had seen the peak of human recklessness, Daniel guided her to another section of the arena. Varia stopped cold. Inside a cage-like structure, two humans faced each other. The crowd around them roared with excitement. One fighter dodged, countered, and launched a powerful strike, knocking the other back. Varia's eyes widened. They are attacking each other. Daniel grinned. Welcome to MMA, mixed martial arts. Varia was horrified. Fighting was supposed to be for survival, for war, not entertainment. Yet here, humans willingly entered combat, not to harm, but to test their skill, strength, and endurance. She watched as one fighter grappled the other to the ground, locking them in a hold. The opponent tapped the mat, and the fight immediately stopped. The two fighters got up, smiling, and exchanged a handshake. Varia was speechless. They do not seek to kill. Daniel shook his head. Nope. It's about discipline, strategy, and pushing limits. They respect each other. She exhaled. Your species is confusing. Daniel grinned. You haven't even seen the best part yet. The final test, conquering the fear. Varia expected Daniel to take her to another death-defying activity, but instead they ended up at a rock-climbing facility. She looked up. The towering walls stretched toward the ceiling, dotted with handholds. You want me to climb this? She asked. Daniel smirked. No, I want you to challenge yourself. She hesitated. Everything she had seen so far had been illogical, dangerous, and reckless. But deep down, a small part of her was curious. Taking a breath, she stepped forward, gripping the first handhold, one step at a time. She climbed higher, her pulse quickening. The ground became distant, the thrill of height, challenge, and determination filling her. When she reached the top, she looked down at Daniel. He was grinning. "See, you're starting to get it." She exhaled, feeling something new. Accomplishment. Maybe humans weren't just reckless. Maybe they were onto something. Viria's mind was still reeling from the events of the past few days. The skydiving, the demolition derby, the extreme sports. It had all been too much. She was beginning to question whether humans were a species driven purely by chaos and destruction. Yet Daniel had promised her that today would be different. Viria followed Daniel, her footsteps hesitant as they approached a large, bright area. The noise from the crowd grew louder, and the flashing lights became blinding. Her senses were overwhelmed as they entered an amusement park. She had never seen anything like it in all her travels across the galaxy. It was as if humans had built an entire world of excitement and chaos, all in one place. This place, Viria started, glancing around. It's so loud, so busy. Daniel grinned. It's called an amusement park. It's where humans come to let loose, have fun, and forget about everything else. Viria frowned, not understanding. Fun. This seems far from it. I've seen more calm environments on war-torn planets. Daniel laughed. You're about to get a taste of what I'm talking about. Before Viria could respond, he pulled her toward a tall, twisting structure, the roller coaster. It was huge, its metal tracks looping in impossible angles high above the ground. The ride was filled with humans who were strapping themselves in, eagerly chatting and laughing. It was as if this was completely normal. Viria swallowed hard. This doesn't look safe. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's the point. This ride is all about the rush. You'll see what I mean. The moment of truth. Viria's heartbeat quickened as Daniel led her into the line. The closer she got to the ride, the more her nerves grew. Thousands of feet up in the air, humans were grinning and screaming, eagerly waiting their turn. She wasn't sure if this was madness or bravery. All she knew was that her body felt like it was already on the ride. Nervous, uncertain, and ready to bolt at any second. When they reached the front, Daniel wasted no time. He gently pushed her toward one of the empty seats and helped her secure the safety harness. It's easy. Just hold on tight. And don't think too much. Viria could only nod, her palms sweating as the roller coaster slowly began its ascent. The click-clack of the wheels on the tracks echoed in her ears. Higher and higher they went, her body slowly lifting off the seat. Every inch upward made her heart race even faster. At the top, she froze. The view was breathtaking, yes, but it was also terrifying. The entire world looked small from up here, the ground seeming so far below. The wind whipped through her hair, and the scent of the surrounding trees barely registered through the nervous buzz in her head. Then it happened. The roller coaster reached the peak, and without warning, it dropped. Viria couldn't help herself. She screamed. The sudden rush of falling, the twisting tracks, and the sharp turns took her breath away. Her body was pressed against the seat as the coaster hurled downward, spinning wildly. She gripped the harness tightly, her fingers aching from the force. But strangely, despite the fear and the overwhelming chaos, she felt something else. Exhilaration. It was as if everything had been stripped away. The panic, the doubt, the control. All that mattered was the present, the moment of pure, uncontrollable speed. And just like that, as the ride sped into its next loop, she started to laugh. A surprising enjoyment. When the ride finally slowed to a stop, Viria's legs were shaky, her chest tight. She could feel her heart still pounding in her ears. She couldn't tell whether she felt relieved or alive. All she knew was that it had been like nothing she had ever experienced before. Daniel was already grinning from ear to ear as they disembarked. "So, what do you think?" Viria blinked, still recovering from the rush. She hesitated, trying to collect her thoughts. "I can't believe I did that." Daniel chuckled. "You screamed the whole way down, but you loved it, didn't you?" Viria crossed her arms. "I did not scream," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Daniel's eyes sparkled. "I think you secretly loved the thrill." She glared at him, but there was something in her eyes, the slight shift. "It wasn't as terrible as I thought." "Well, there you go," he said, giving her a pat on the back. "You're starting to understand humans now. It's all about the thrill of pushing your limits, facing the unknown." Viria couldn't deny it. The roller coaster ride had been intense, but it had also been alive. It had been something she had never felt before. A rush of energy that came from letting go, not controlling the outcome, but instead embracing the unknown. For the first time since she arrived on Earth, she was starting to understand. Humans weren't reckless out of ignorance or foolishness. They were reckless because they were curious, because they desired new experiences and challenges. As they walked away from the ride, Viria glanced back at the towering roller coaster, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She had feared it, dreaded it, and yet she felt proud, not of the ride itself, but of her ability to confront it and enjoy it. Maybe, just maybe, humans weren't so illogical after all. Viria was beginning to question everything she thought she knew about humans. The roller coasters, the skydiving, the extreme sports, they had all left her shaken, yet strangely impressed. But Daniel was far from finished with his plans. He seemed determined to push her limits even further. After the roller coaster, Viria thought she had earned a break. She had been on enough rides to last a lifetime. But Daniel had other ideas. "You're ready for the next thing," he said, his grin wide as he led her to a food stall in the corner of the amusement park. "What now?" Viria asked, her voice weary from the earlier excitement. Daniel waved his hand toward a brightly colored stand that was serving food. "You've got to try some of Earth's most famous dishes. This one is a spicy challenge." Viria's brow furrowed. "Spicy? I've read about it. Isn't it dangerous?" "Not if you're careful," Daniel replied with a chuckle. "It's all about how much you can handle." The spicy challenge. Viria followed him, her senses already tingling with nervousness. The smell of strong spices wafted through the air, and she could already feel the heat building as they approached the stall. Humans crowded around, grinning as they eagerly took bites of something that looked far too bright red to be safe. "This is the ghost pepper," Daniel said as the vendor handed them 2 small plates. "The spiciest pepper in the world." Viria looked at the small pepper on her plate. It glowed with a fiery intensity, its red surface almost mocking her. The heat seemed to radiate off it. She hesitated, her instincts warning her to back away. "This looks dangerous." "Just take a bite," Daniel urged. "It's not that bad, I promise." Viria glanced at him, unsure. She didn't know whether he was joking or genuinely confident, but she had already faced so many challenges. What was one more? Taking a deep breath, she picked up the pepper and bit into it. Immediately, a burning sensation filled her mouth. The heat was like nothing she had ever experienced before. It felt like fire racing down her throat, swallowing her from the inside out. Her eyes watered, and she gasped for air. This is insane." Daniel was laughing, clearly enjoying her reaction. "It's supposed to be intense. Just give it a few seconds." Viria's face turned red as the heat continued to spread, leaving her breathless. "I am not enjoying this." "Don't worry," Daniel said, his voice tinged with humor. "It'll pass. Just drink some milk." Viria grabbed the glass of milk Daniel handed her, gulping it down as if her life depended on it. Slowly, the burning sensation began to fade, but she couldn't help but feel slightly proud of herself. Despite the pain, she had done it. She had faced the challenge. "You survived," Daniel said, offering her a playful grin. "How does it feel?" Viria wiped her mouth, still recovering from the heat. "I'm not sure I want to try this again." Daniel laughed. "Don't worry, we're done with food challenges for now. Time for something else. Ghost stories. The human fear." Once again, Daniel led her to another section of the park. This time, the area was quieter, more serene. They sat down on a bench beneath a large glowing tree, the soft hum of the park in the background. Around them, humans were gathering in small circles, quietly talking to one another. Viria looked around, trying to figure out what was happening. "What is this?" Daniel gave her a knowing look. "It's time for ghost stories." "Ghost stories," Viria repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You mean to tell me you enjoy scaring yourselves?" "Exactly," he replied, grinning. "Ghost stories are a big part of human culture. We tell them to enjoy the thrill of fear, but in a safe way. It's all part of the fun." Viria couldn't believe what she was hearing. Humans deliberately scare themselves for amusement. It seemed unbelievable. Yet, as she sat and listened to the eerie tales being shared around her, she began to feel the tension in the air. The humans' voices lowered, their stories growing darker. The tale of a haunted house, a lost soul, and supernatural forces gripped the group in suspense. Viria's curiosity got the better of her. She leaned forward slightly, listening intently. Her natural instinct to observe, to analyze, overpowered her skepticism. She watched as the humans' eyes widened, their voices full of mystery. The storyteller described an ancient house that seemed to be alive, its walls creaking, doors slamming shut on their own, and shadows moving where they shouldn't. As the story grew darker, Viria could feel a chill running down her spine. It wasn't fear. No, she was trained to face fear, to look it in the eye. But it was the unknown, the strange feeling that these stories could have a grain of truth in them, that made her uneasy. She turned to Daniel. "Why do you do this? Tell stories to scare yourselves." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the flickering lights around them. "It's about pushing our boundaries. Humans love to explore the unknown, even if it scares us. We want to test ourselves, to see how we react when faced with what we can't explain." Viria thought about that for a moment. The idea of pushing boundaries was something she was becoming more familiar with. She had faced a skydiving drop, a roller coaster ride, and even the intense heat of a ghost pepper. But this was something different. This was about fear itself, about embracing something intangible and facing it head-on. The thrill of fear. As the story ended, the group let out a collective sigh of relief, laughter filling the air. No one seemed frightened anymore, just exhilarated. Viria didn't understand it fully, but she couldn't deny that the humans seemed to thrive on these strange experiences. Daniel nudged her, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "See, even fear can be fun." Viria shook her head, but she couldn't stop a small smile from forming. "You humans are strange." Daniel grinned. "And you're starting to get it." It wasn't about seeking danger, she realized. It was about embracing the unknown. Whether it was the heat of a pepper, the speed of a roller coaster, or the fear of a ghost story, humans didn't shy away from discomfort. They faced it, challenged it, and came out stronger on the other side. And in that moment, Viria began to understand why humans did what they did. She was no longer just an outsider observing. She was beginning to feel it too. The next day, Viria found herself in a new setting, a quiet park surrounded by tall trees and the gentle sound of birds chirping. After the madness of the past few days, Daniel had promised something more peaceful this time. He said it was important to take a break and relax before jumping into more challenges. Viria wasn't sure what to expect, but she had learned to stop questioning Daniel's plans. So far, everything had been far more strange than she had imagined. Yet somehow it had all made sense in its own way. She had faced dangers, felt fear and exhilaration, but there was something else that was beginning to stir inside her, a sense of curiosity and fascination with humans. As they walked through the park, Virea couldn't help but notice how different the atmosphere was. The hustle and bustle of the amusement park had been replaced with peaceful quiet and the occasional laughter from families enjoying a day outside. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating shadows on the grass. It was almost too calm, but Virea found herself appreciating the stillness. "Where are we going?" Virea asked, looking around. "We're going to sit by the lake and talk," Daniel replied. "You've had a lot of adventures, but sometimes the best way to understand something is to step back and just think." Virea felt a strange mix of emotions. She had expected Earth to be full of chaos and unpredictability. But now, with the peaceful park around her, she was seeing the planet in a different light. Humans didn't only thrive on extreme challenges, they also understood the need for balance. As they reached the edge of the lake, Daniel gestured to a bench facing the water. They both sat down, and Virea let out a slow breath. She wasn't used to relaxing. It had been so long since she had taken the time to just be still. Daniel broke the silence. "I know the past few days have been overwhelming, but I think you're starting to get what I meant about humans. We don't just do things for the thrill. There's a lot more to it than that." Virea glanced at him, confused. "I don't understand. You take risks for fun. You intentionally put yourselves in dangerous situations. I still don't get why you do it." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know it sounds strange, but it's about the challenge, not just the danger. Every time we push ourselves, whether it's jumping out of a plane or telling a scary story, we're testing our limits, and when we overcome something difficult, we feel stronger. We learn something about ourselves." Virea sat silently, her mind processing his words. She had watched humans for years, keeping a close eye on their activities, always seeing them as reckless or irrational. But now, after experiencing it herself, she was beginning to see the deeper meaning behind their actions. She glanced at Daniel, the question still lingering in her mind. "But what about the fear? I saw you at the amusement park. Everyone was laughing and enjoying themselves while riding those terrifying machines. How do you just ignore your fear?" Daniel smiled. "We don't ignore it. We embrace it. Fear is natural. It's something that warns us of danger. But humans aren't defined by our fear. We choose to face it, conquer it. We find strength in the things that make us afraid. That's why we do these things, not because they're easy, but because they teach us about who we really are." Virea stared at him for a moment, the weight of his words settling on her. She had never thought about fear like that before. To her, fear had always been something to avoid, something that held people back. But humans, they learned from it. They didn't run from fear, they ran toward it, embracing it as a challenge. And in doing so, they grew stronger. "I'm starting to understand," she said softly. "Humans aren't just reckless. You're resilient." Daniel's eyes sparkled. "Exactly. Humans are resilient because we're curious. We always want to know what's on the other side of fear, what lies beyond the boundaries we set for ourselves. It's how we grow. It's how we learn to be better." Virea took a deep breath, her gaze still fixed on the calm water of the lake. Everything had changed in the past few days. The chaos, the danger, the fear. It had all been a way for her to see human strength in a new light. It wasn't about being fearless or avoiding the unknown. It was about facing it head-on, with courage and curiosity. "I've never really understood you humans before," she said slowly. "I always thought you were reckless. But now, I see that you're challenging yourselves, not because you're foolish, but because you want to be better." Daniel nodded, a small smile on his face. "Exactly. It's about the journey, not just the destination. We find meaning in the things that test us, and when we succeed, we grow, together." For the first time since she arrived on Earth, Virea felt a strange sense of peace. She wasn't sure she fully understood all the complexities of human nature, but she felt she had begun to scratch the surface. It wasn't just the extreme sports or the spicy food that defined humanity. It was their ability to face the unknown, to embrace challenges, and to find meaning in the process. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the lake. Viria watched as the water shimmered, feeling a sense of contentment she hadn't known she needed. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was starting to see things through a new lens. Perhaps, just perhaps, the human way of life wasn't as alien as she had once thought. Maybe it was just another form of strength, one that came from resilience, curiosity, and the constant desire to grow beyond limits. And with that thought, Viria smiled to herself. Maybe, just maybe, Earth had a lot more to offer than she had ever imagined. Viria stood at the edge of the city's highest tower, gazing out over the sprawling metropolis beneath her. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets. The city lights slowly flickered on, twinkling like stars scattered across the ground. Everything was calm, almost serene. Yet Viria's heart raced with anticipation. The past week had been a whirlwind of experiences. She had seen humanity at its most wild, riding roller coasters, skydiving from thousands of feet, enduring the heat of ghost peppers, and braving extreme sports. What had begun as an investigation had become something else entirely. A transformation. She turned toward Daniel, who stood beside her, his gaze also directed at the city below. His presence had become something familiar to her. Over the days, he had become more than just a guide. He had become a window into the very essence of humanity. And as much as she had tried to remain detached, to remain objective, something had changed inside her. She had learned more about humans than she ever thought possible. "I still don't know how you do it," Viria said, her voice quieter than usual. "How do you handle the fear and still seek out more challenges?" Daniel turned to face her, his grin ever present. "It's about embracing the unknown, Viria. Humans don't always know what's coming, but that's the fun part. We get to write our own story, and we don't know how it will end. That's what keeps it exciting." Viria took a deep breath, her eyes still scanning the view. "You truly live for this unpredictability." "Yes," he replied. "We live for the thrill, for the lessons learned along the way. It's about testing limits, not knowing if you'll succeed or fail, but finding out anyway." She felt a strange sense of admiration for him, for the humans who thrived in a world where uncertainty wasn't feared but celebrated. It was so different from her world, where every action was calculated, every risk analyzed and contained. On Earth, it was as if the very essence of being human was unpredictable, and that's what made it beautiful. Daniel stepped closer, his voice filled with a playful challenge. "There's one more thing I want to show you, Viria. You're not done yet." Viria raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "Another roller coaster." He grinned. "Not exactly, but something just as thrilling." She looked at him, intrigued. "What are you planning?" "You'll see," he said cryptically, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Without another word, he turned and began to walk toward a nearby helipad, a large flat area that looked out over the city. Viria followed, her curiosity piqued. They reached the edge of the helipad, and Daniel gestured toward a sleek helicopter parked nearby. It was the kind of vehicle she had seen before, but never imagined she would ride in. "Are we going to fly?" she asked, her voice laced with both excitement and hesitation. Daniel nodded. "We are. But this isn't just a regular ride. We're going to do something called aerial acrobatics. You know, flips and twists through the air. It's a little different from what you've experienced before." Viria felt a surge of doubt, her instincts screaming to back away. The thought of jumping into a moving vehicle that would spin, dive, and twist through the air felt like too much, her mind filled with images of disaster. She wanted to refuse, but something inside her hesitated. Wasn't this the final test, the challenge that would push her to face everything she had learned about humans? Wasn't this the ultimate opportunity to embrace the unknown once and for all? She looked at Daniel. His smile was reassuring, yet there was a glint in his eyes that dared her to take the plunge, to dare to experience it all. "Let's do it," she said, surprising herself. The words came out before she could stop them. Daniel's face broke into a wide grin. "That's the spirit." He motioned for her to climb in. The thrill of the unknown. The helicopter's blades began to spin, and Viria gripped the side of her seat as the aircraft lifted off the ground. The world below shrank quickly, and soon they were soaring high above the city. Viria's heart raced, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something new. Daniel turned to her with a grin. "Ready for the fun part?" Viria nodded, bracing herself as he pushed the controls, sending the helicopter into a steep dive. The world below seemed to fall away as they spiraled down, twisting and spinning through the sky. Viria's stomach flipped, but instead of panic, there was a strange exhilaration. The world was spinning around her, but she couldn't look away. She had trusted herself to Daniel, and he hadn't let her down. As the helicopter flipped and spiraled through the air, Viria couldn't help but laugh, the sound escaping her without control. It was a wild, freeing feeling. For the first time, she felt like she was completely in the moment, not worrying about the outcome, but enjoying the ride. The helicopter leveled out, and they soared high into the sky, the city sprawling beneath them like a vast map. Viria breathed deeply, her chest expanding with exhilaration. She felt alive, more alive than she ever had. She had faced her fears, pushed her limits, and experienced the rush of the unknown. And in doing so, she had discovered something about herself that she hadn't known existed. Daniel turned to her, his eyes filled with pride. "You did it. You've embraced everything." Viria smiled, her heart still pounding, but for a different reason now. She hadn't just faced her fear, she had overcome it. And now, the world seemed different. Humans were brave, yes, but it was their willingness to embrace the unknown that made them remarkable. As the helicopter touched down, Viria knew one thing for certain. She had come to Earth to study humans, to analyze them, but what she had found was far more than just data. She had discovered courage, resilience, and a deep desire to explore everything life had to offer. And in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, humans were the ones who had the right idea all along. Daniel turned to her with a smile. "So, what do you think? Ready for more?" Viria grinned, the thrill of the experience still buzzing through her. "What's next?"